What is up, everybody? Coming to you live. Well, actually, not live because this is obviously recorded. I am currently, obviously, in my apartment, and I was dealing with some crazy stuff last night. I can't even. I mean, it wasn't direct, but it was really close. So I'm not gonna get too deep into what that was, but I was experiencing some really weird stuff in my apartment. Literally last night, I wasn't even able to sleep that much. Ignore my hairline. Anyways, I'm gonna be reading some pages out of this book. Now, this isn't a book based on astrology. I was going to continue to read Chance Biller's book about Rahu, also known as the North Node of the Moon. However, this book has really gotten my attention because it's just so strange of a book. But I'm going to read to you guys. Let's see. We'll get through the first chapter. I mean, not the first chapter in the book, but I'm just going to be reading like excerpts. So this is called Hidden People. Here's the imagery. Here's the book, by the way, Fraud by David Rakoff, who did pass away already. But this is Hidden People in Fraud. It is not pleasant to have my bluff so thoroughly called. My idle claim of being a translucent, skinned neurasthenic who cares nothing for sunlight is incontrovertibly shattered after a mere 10 minutes of ambling through the duty-free shop at Keflavik Airport in Iceland at 10 in the morning. The November sky outside is still as dark as 4 a.m., precisely the time it would be for me if I were still back in New York. But I am not back in New York, and should, by all rights, be enjoying that cognitive dissonance that is the happy dividend of transatlantic air travel. The European day, brightly risen and well underway 6 hours before its time, I find myself existentially, spirit-robbingly sad as I look over the shelves of vacuum-packed salmon, tin smoked puffin, lumpfish caviar, and licorice, waiting for a ride into Reykjavik. By the time I have been in Iceland for an hour, I am a walking Edvard Munch lithograph. All is blackness in my heart, as well as outside the windows of the bus during the hour-long trip into town. The vehicle fishtails wildly, buffeted by inhospitable winds. When I get back to New York, I think to myself, I shall never again denigrate the light. I will start a letter-writing campaign to institute National Photosynthesis Day. I will join a tanning salon. I've come to do a story on Iceland's hidden people, invisible beings from another dimension who, along with elves and trolls, are a mainstay of the country's folklore. It was a newspaper story about the hidden people who live in Greystein, literally. Grey Rock, one of Reykjavik's most renowned boulders, that brought me here. Greystein sits cracked in two, fat and satisfied on its own square of sod, just to the state road number 1, leading north out of the city, surveying the highway traffic that it has managed to divert not once, but twice. Victor Ingolfsson is chief of the publishing unit for the Icelandic Public Roads Administration. I almost said chief of police because I'm watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He has brought me to the Rock. Any and all newsworthy incidents that occur anywhere along Iceland's 12,000 kilometers of road are Victor's bailiwick. Incidents like Greystein in 1971, plans were underway to resurface road number 1, making it necessary to detonate Grey Rock. Suddenly, locals came forward and protested the destruction, claiming that it was inhabited. It was claimed that any desecration of the hidden people's home would result in innumerable and unfathomable bad things. This is nothing new. Accounts of construction accidents, malfunctioning equipment, and garden variety bad luck associated with unheeded warnings have entered the national mythology. So, despite no history of hidden people tales attached to the rock prior to 1971, the Public Roads Administration bowed to the protests and spared the boulder. In 1999, road expansion necessitated Grestains being moved yet again. By this time, the intervening decades had lent the rock a legitimacy, a bona fide national importance, where originally it had been moved with a big bulldozer and a push. Such brusque treatment that resulted in the rocks cracking in two. The photographs that Victor shows me of the most recent operation show a sling of yellow nylon belts, a rock coddled like an egg. The pictures of this delicate procedure are in the internal newsletter of the PRA. Victor puts out 2 weekly publications, one internal, the other for widespread consumption. The public newsletter made no mention of the second Greystein incident. Victor has been working for the PRA for 30 years since his first summer job there as a boy of 14. Prior to my arrival, he had sent me an article he had written about the hidden people sites under the PRA's jurisdiction. It is titled The Public Roads Administration and the Belief in Elves. Turns out to be quite beautifully written. In addition to his day job, Victor is a novelist. His third book has been on the national bestseller list for months. The craft is evident in what, in other hands, will be nothing more than a press release. The article is a minor classic of shifting tone, a fascinating mixture of weary exasperation and respect for the feelings of others. He writes, a lot of time goes into answering the same old questions. This text can be looked upon as the author's interpretation of the PRA's view on the issue. It will not answer the question of whether the PRA's employees do or do not believe in elves and hidden people, because opinion differs greatly, and it tends to be a rather personal matter. However, you may assume that the author severely doubts the existence of such phenomena about the alleged curses and tales of accidents surrounding construction. He gently chides the reader. Everybody has their ups and downs in life, and we all suffer blows. You should ask yourself, when was the last time something equally bad happened, and who was bothered that time? The New York Times story that piqued my interest has made Victor the focus of much foreign attention. Okay. If he is sick of believing, if he is sick of being called by reporters, he was very easy to find. The old wives' tale about the Icelandic telephone directory being listed by first names turns out to be completely true. He makes an intermittently good show of hiding it. When I ask him what his other duties as publishing director are, he cheerfully replies, "Oh, I do all sorts of strange things like talk to you people." Victor has offered to show me around some of Reykjavik's enchanted spots, but first, to give me a proper look at the city, we drive up to the Pearl, a huge glass bubble housing a cafe, a revolving restaurant, and an observation deck that sits on a hill above the city. The sphere, which does indeed shimmer like a pearl, is built on top of the huge cisterns, the size of oil tanks that hold the city's hot water supply. Victor explains that Reykjavik is heated geothermally, making it the cleanest capital city on Earth. You might smell a little sulfur when you shower. I don't notice it anymore, he tells me. That slight smell of sulfur proves to be an almost unbearably nauseating stench for the uninitiated. The view from atop the Pearl is not what I had expected. I had envisioned a baby Amsterdam, all spun sugar, northern European architecture, spires, gables, cobblestones. Despite being over 200 years old, it is surprisingly new. Turns out to be a very Bauhaus kind of town with a very low horizon, only a few stories high, and very many of the buildings, houses included, are clad in corrugated metal siding. It looks not a little like a vast Audi dealership. Getting back into the car on an overcast afternoon, he admits openly that these hidden people incidents, when they come up, represent a PR problem for the Public Roads Administration. They then have to brace themselves for being labeled as insensitive. There is also the danger that such reports will open the floodgates and all manner of copycat stories will come rushing in, despite the fact that, according to Victor, very few people actually believe in this quaint folk tradition. If that's so, I wonder aloud, why make any concession? Because the people who do believe, they are pretty serious about it, he says. I counter as how we certainly have people who believe in a lot of things that no one else does, and we would never think to listen to them. He explains Reykjavik's unique situation to me. This is a small community, you see, so basically everyone knows everyone almost. You really have to listen to everyone because you could probably meet them at a party in a little while. When you scream at someone in traffic in New York, you know you're not going to meet them again, so you do it, but not so much here. His reasoning is valid, even if only mathematically. There are arguably as many people within a half-mile radius of my apartment. That's just 10 blocks in any direction as there are in the entire country of Iceland. I am infinitely more tolerant of the psychotic woman with Tourette's syndrome who walks up and down my block all day long, every day, starting at 6 a.m., precisely because I see her every day. Although effectively a complete stranger, she is more than that. She is my neighbor. Plus, she seems to enjoy picking up litter. But that's not the point. The fact is, we all live with daily superstitions, vestiges of ancient beliefs, otherwise completely pragmatic grown-ups who refuse to walk underneath ladders, brief interruptions in conversation while someone scrambles around to find some wood to knock on. And we'll just take a quick break to explain, in my opinion, what's going on here. Now, first, this book is actually, if you don't know what an anthology is a collection of stories, and it's book form. So, it could have been expanded on, but these are short stories, collective short stories. Do I believe in extraterrestrial sentient variants? Yes. Do I believe in multi-dimensions? Yes. Do I believe in alternate consciousness states, paradigm shifting, quantum leaping? Yes. That's what I wanted to say. And if you see my other content, you know that. So, I have a few pages left of this story. Arnie Bjornsson is a cultural anthropologist and head of the ethnological department at the National Museum. He's a sweet-looking, beetle-browed, grandfatherly type. A man in his 70s, originally from a farm in the countryside, closely mirrors Iceland's emergence into the modern age. Like Victor, Arnie also seems wistfully regretful that the pretext that gets someone like me on a plane and over to Iceland is to scrutinize this daffy, essentially non-representative aspect of a society that is distinguished in countless other ways. The oldest parliament in the world, the legendary consistency of its gene pool, the highest number of published poets per capita on Earth. Imagine you are outside a jazz club, a place devoted to a quintessentially American art form, and a reporter from elsewhere comes up and, microphone in hand, starts quizzing you on why so many high-rises here don't have 13th floors. When Arnie speaks of his childhood in rural Iceland, he distills very clearly the ambivalent relationship it seems most Icelanders have with these myths. I didn't believe, but I didn't exclude the possibility. On my own farm there were 2 cliffs, and it was said that some hidden people lived there. You should not cut the grass near the cliffs because it belonged to the hidden people. There were stories about men who had not obeyed this rule and they had some accidents. This turns out to be a paradigmatic model, which I hear over and over again. The story of the grass belonging to the hidden people that must never be cut. Irma Bombeck, my husband is so lazy, joke as folkloric myth. The other model of story that keeps coming up is one of benevolent wish fulfillment, as opposed to disguise admonition. In these stories, mortal women fall into slumbers from which they cannot be woken. In this dream state, they are visited by hidden people. They are taken into hidden people's homes, invariably more comfortable than their own, and also invariably, having performed some service or having been fallen in love with, these mortal women are given pieces of fine cloth, much finer than anything available to them in their waking lives. The hidden people are like human beings, but if anything, they are more beautiful. They are better clothed. The world of the hidden people was a sort of dream world for the poor people. They had better houses, furniture, clothes, food. Iceland is a land of contrast. Geologically, it is a very young country. Glaciers, volcanoes, earthquakes, lava streams. There is no stability. This instability has an effect on national character. When we think that there were practically no towns in Iceland until the 19th century, people with vivid fantasies on the individual and very scattered farms, they found themselves neighbors in the nearby cliffs and hills. Freud's theory of dreams is ultimately that they are, at heart, disguised versions of unacceptable wishes, of infantile desires, whose fulfillment is necessarily unhealthy or unattainable. In a country as physically inhospitable as Iceland once was, with its spread out, sparse population, things as basic as warmth, clothing, sufficient food, and companionship might all be seen as inappropriate eruptions from the ideal. Despite having been in Reykjavik only a few days, I understand Iceland's particular brand of desolation. In an effort to banish the blues during those few hours between when the sun goes down at about 4 and the time when it might be appropriate to start drinking, I take myself to see Fight Club, which while featuring an awfully good performance by the 4-inch band of flesh across Brad Pitt's stomach, just above his pubic hair, does little to lift my spirits. For the most part, however, the nasty brutishness of the elements in present-day Reykjavik is really no more than a phantom pain. Still, the stories that hearken from that hard-scrabble time are fondly remembered and closely guarded by people. Arnie Cities, a study that found that 10% of the population firmly believed in hidden people, 10% firmly disbelieved, and the remaining 80% hovered somewhere along the continuum of skepticism. This seems fairly well borne out when I talk to people. They can all recall local stories about rocks that must be avoided, grass that must not be cut, construction snafus, and the like. One young woman, a super hip chick in a long black skirt, shiny dark red top, glittery boa, and black felt platform boots, claims to have seen an elf once. When I press her for details, though, she can conjure up little more than the standard Disney details of a beard and a little hat. Interestingly, wherever the people I interview land on the spectrum of credulity, pretty well all of them think that it's at the very least only sporting to make an effort at belief. It is that yearning quality, that sense that it's at least nice to believe in hidden people, that comes up again and again, even from a skeptic like Arnie. The tales are a vestige of a pre-urban Iceland. They are a holdover from what came before, and the physical record of what came before seems to be disappearing at an alarming rate in Reykjavik. Everywhere I look, there is a new construction. Urbanization is intrinsically a violent process. It elicits a terrified nostalgia. It makes us want to hold fast to what we feel is being lost. This was at the heart of the arts and crafts movement of the 19th century, with its concentration on handiwork, on the non-industrial. In part, it's what made the Brothers Grimm decide to compile their oral ethnography of indigenous German folk tales when they did. Even Martha Stewart's monomaniacal obsession with the homemade is born of a similar impulse. An impulse to, if not stop time, at least slow it down some, preserve some sense of history. To hear Magnus Skarfedinson tell it, he founded his elf school in a similar spirit of folkloric anthropology. The school offers 4-hour seminars, mostly for foreigners. The course includes a bus tour of the main elf and hidden people sites in Reykjavik, followed by a typical Icelandic coffee and pancake breakfast. It's all pleasantly low rent. The sign on the door is a paper flyer decorated with a drawing of a cartoon ghost, complete with a sheath on its head and its hands outstretched. Some elves building a sweet little house and a horseman being guided through the night by a hooded spirit hovering in a nimbus of fire. The elf school also offers aura readings and past life explorations. In the hallway outside Magnus' office stands a plaster elf about 3 feet high. He has a gray beard and a green hat and breeches, garden variety garden gnome. Within that 10% of people who yearn for hidden people to exist, Magnus, it seems, yearns the most, but he covers this yearning with a veneer of clinical dispassion. I'm just a historian, a scientist, he says. He refers to what he sees as a general disbelief as a dilemma. He is convinced that if similar funding were poured into the scientific research of hidden people as it is into other areas like medicine, we would have conclusive proof of their existence. When I ask precisely what specific kinds of scientific testing might be addressed, Magnus leaves it at finding all the dimensions other than our own. Magnus is clearly on the bus despite his claims of neutrality. Leads me through the different types of elves. Some are humanoid, while some are more simian. They range in size from less than an inch up to just under 5 feet. Magnus speaks about hidden people as an anthropologist or a census taker might. Contrast with elves, hidden people are completely human, divisible into 3 types. Those who are about a foot taller than us and dress in ancient Icelandic garb, a little-known group who dress all in blue and are sometimes even blue-skinned, and the main population of hidden people numbering up to some 30,000 individuals who are totally like us, but a little smaller, and their clothing is like ours, but about 50 years from the past. This last detail makes things a little clearer. It can't simply be a matter of fashions taking a generation to penetrate the spirit dimension. I'd like to believe in a world of benevolent and beautiful creatures who live in rocks as much as the next guy, but it seems decidedly to be falling down on one scientific method job, not to inquire more deeply into the fact that the vast majority of hidden people sightings have them dressed in the clothing of, one's dead relatives. But I cannot help being touched by Magnus's devotion to his subject. Even the contradictions, the lapses in interrogative rigor, are, in the end, not much different from those of someone who has faith in God or religion. There's something quite sweet about his ardent hope that one day he might be granted some access, that the beings he spends all his days documenting might make themselves visible to him. Oh, I would love to see them, especially to be invited to the cliffs, and I would ask him 5,000 questions. He becomes positively animated as he talks about it, his voice whooping up in excitement. Where did you get the carpet? Where did you get the table? Where did you get the stove? Have you been abroad? Recovering his composure, he adds, almost embarrassed, that's probably the reason they haven't invited me. Clearly rankles him a little bit that Erla, Stefan's daughter, a piano teacher and one of Iceland's most noted elf communicators, claims she has been seeing elves and hidden people her whole life. Magnus led me to believe that my chances of meeting Erla will be slim to none, that she is a difficult prima donna, she will not be helpful, that she traffics in arbitrary rivalries within the elf community. I call to set up the interview. She actually seems to be sobbing uncontrollably on the other end of the line, all the while talking to me. In her defense, who actually picks up the phone in the middle of a crying jag? Besides, without having to push, she tells me to come the next day at 4 o'clock. I was expecting wild gray hair, clinking jewelry, a tatterdemalion velvet cape. Oh my gosh. I was expecting wild gray hair, clinking jewelry, a tatterdemalion velvet cape, from whose folds wafted the scent of incense, a house full of candles, dream catchers, cats, and bad art. Instead, I found a friendly, if somewhat shy woman in her 40s, living in a lovely apartment on the top floor of a Reykjavik townhouse with a bay window, aside from a tiny elf figure made of 3 painted stones piled up snowman style outside her front door. Erla's house is decorated in the tasteful, middle-class aesthetic one might expect of a piano teacher. Landscape paintings, old furniture. The place is warm and cozy on a particularly blustering, windy day. Erla's friend, Bjork, is there to translate, although Erla's English is sufficient to slap me down at our rather awkward beginning. I asked when she first realized she could see hidden people. This is very stupid to ask when I was born, like that one right there, she says, indicating a place on the coffee table beside a Danish modern glass ashtray. She then catches herself. Oh, that's right, you can't see it. She shakes her head slightly and mused at her forgetfulness that others do not possess her gift. It's a somewhat disingenuous moment, like when your friend, newly back from a semester in Paris, says to you, it's like, I forget the English word, how you say fromage? Apparently, the coffee table in front of me is a veritable marketplace of elves milling about, many of them in separate dimensions and oblivious to one another. Bjork takes over, essentially ferrying me through this gnomish cocktail party. One sits there, 2 are walking over here, one sits there. When she plays music, they come, it attracts them. I'm suddenly overcome with a completely inappropriate urge, the barely suppressed impulse to slam my hand down on the coffee table really, really hard, right where she's pointing. Apparently, the elves on the table are in too remote a dimension and are too small to talk to. Conveniently, every home also comes equipped with a house elf about the size of the average 3-year-old, with whom one can communicate. Every home, I ask. Yes, you have one in your house in New York too, Bjork assures me. If only my house elf, sick and tired of my skepticism, was taking pains to prove its existence once and for all by cleaning my apartment for me at that very moment. I joke, let us have balloons. Bjork points out that house elves are a privilege, not a right. When the energy of a given house gets too negative, she says, when there's drinking or fighting, the elves will leave. Not terribly surprisingly, mysticism, New Age philosophy, recovery speak, and elves are conflated as one. Erla says that elves are a manifestation of nature. They are inherently good. Without them, we would choke on our own pollution. There's almost no more urban a view of nature than this pastoral, idyllic one. Humankind bad, nature good. As in drinking and fighting bad, elves and flowers good. But it's a false dichotomy. After all, following this logic, Sistine Chapel bad, Ebola virus good. Over the course of my trip, I visit 3 inhabited sites: the Grey Rock, another small pile of rocks covered with wintry grass called the Elf Bank Road, and a third place where Magnus takes me, a boulder that decades previously is said to have wrought havoc on egg production at the nearby poultry farm. What's extraordinary about all of them is how visually unprepossessing they are. None have the prototypical look of enchantment we might associate with fairy tales. They aren't impressively sized. They are not possessed of anthropomorphic whorls or striations in their surfaces, overhung with gnarled vines. In fact, they are just lichen-covered rocks, resting on yellowing squares of sod. Magnus's aged dog, Tina, relieves herself no fewer than 3 times during the short interval we spend at the chicken rock. Can't blame the dog. The rock looks like the perfect place to take a leak, sitting as it does at the end of a very unphotogenic gravel driveway, near a covered garage and a chain-link fence, aside from a very small plaque that reads Borka Mayanjar, place protected by the city. There is no discernible effort made to beautify the surroundings, other than not bulldozing them or blowing them up. There seem to be no concessions made for these mystical neighbors. As for that other type of concession, the kind selling gnome wear, clothing printed with, I was a succubus in a boulder in Reykjavik, and all I got was this lousy t-shirt or stuffed elves. There is none. I see this as a lost opportunity, marketing-wise. In 4 days in Reykjavik, I've seen a total of maybe 8 elves, not one of them for sale. Can't chalk this reserve up to embarrassment. Not everyone has the same concerns as Victor, hoping to keep reports and stories at a minimum. Even a circus barker like Magnus with his school pulls his punches and sells nothing more pricey than a bus tour and some pancakes. This reserve is almost incomprehensible to a North American. Or even the vague impression of the face of Mother Teresa peeking out of the pastry folds of a salmon bun was enough to turn the coffee shop where it appeared into a shrine, however briefly. It almost seems as though folks are taking their cues from the hidden people themselves, respecting their concealment and according them the peace and quiet of beloved, beleaguered stars. On my way out of the city to Keflavik Airport, I get a sustained look at the landscape that was dark upon my arrival. In the weak afternoon light, it is an unrelievedly monochromatic view. Flat, vaguely undulating black rock, cracked all over with the tracery of fissures. To the right, the vast gray sea, and to the left, in the distance, the strange hills, looking like whales resting on their sides, each one isolated against the horizon. At one point, we drive within half a mile of the perfect cone of a young volcano. In the gray sky, the dark gray curtain of a rainstorm travels back and forth over the land, over the bus. In A Midsummer Night's Dream, Shakespeare describes the Athenian wood that lies just beyond the gates of the city as a place where the wild thyme blows, where ox lips and the nodding violet grows, quite over canopied with lush woodbine, with sweet musk roses and eglantine. It's crowded in that Athenian forest. You can't take 2 steps without bumping into some confused lover or rude mechanical sporting the head of an ass. By contrast, Icelanders were frequently all alone in the wilderness, with no blossom-heavy branches concealing countless magical fairies. The spaces yawn open, wide, and disconnected, and it is our nature to connect, to create for ourselves a fully formed community where none exists. We are hardwired for it, as Thesis says, the poet's eye, in a fine frenzy rolling, doth glance from heaven to earth, from earth to heaven, and as imagination bodies forth the forms of things unknown, the poet's pen turns them to shape and gives to airy nothing a local habitation and a name. I might do a follow-up on Extraordinary Alien, which is the next story. So subscribe, like, and we'll see you in the next video to teach you more with peace and love.